Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Down the Tee Tennis Podcast. We're back today to preview the Olympics men's and women's singles draws. I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by Kieran Archer. Kieran, how are you doing, and are you looking forward to the Olympics? We've had to wait 5 years.
Definitely. I mean, the tennis tournament especially, but also every aspect of the Olympics. I just think it is such fun. It's great to see so many different sports. It's always a great time inspiring people to take up sport and to try new things as well. I'm looking forward to, this is really boring, but I'm looking forward to the Olympics football. I think that's an interesting tournament, looking through the squads there. I'm looking forward to seeing sports like archery, swimming. It's brilliant. I do love the Olympics. Handball as well. I really get into handball around the time of the Olympics.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's so many brilliant events to follow in like sports which you wouldn't usually necessarily follow on a yearly basis. And yeah, it is just such a unique occasion. So very much looking forward to it. And before we get into the tennis draws, we'll just touch on some of the recent events on the tour post Wimbledon. The biggest event so far that there's been since Wimbledon is the ATP 500 in Hamburg, where Pablo Carreño Busta won the title, defeating Filip Krajinovic in the final, and a couple of others on the ATP side. Last week in Bastad, Sweden, there's an ATP 250 where Casper Ruud defeated Federico Coria in the final. It's Ruud's third title. And Newport, grass court event post Wimbledon in the United States, Kevin Anderson winning his first title in quite a while, beating young American Jensen Brooksby in the final. He's, I think, an interesting young player to keep an eye on. He's had some great results on the Challenger Tour this year, so a good run for him and a good win for Anderson after he's had some recent struggles with injuries. Then on the WTA side, a 250 event in Prague where Barbara Krejcikova won her third title of the year on home soil there, defeating Martin Kobra in the final. It's also an event in Lausanne, Switzerland, another 250 where Tamara Zidansek, French Open semi-finalist, won her first WTA title, defeating Clara Burel. And in Hungary, another WTA 250 where Yulia Putintseva defeated Alina Kalinina in the final. So just a quick roundup of the recent events, some on clay, and yeah, all those were on clay besides Newport, which is on grass, and Prague on hard course. So just to touch on who's missing from the Olympics before we get into the draws and preview and make up predictions. There's 5 of the ATP top 10 and 11 of the top 20 missing. The most significant of those top 10 players: Rafael Nadal, Dominic Thiem, Roger Federer, Matteo Berrettini, Roberto Bautista Agut. And on the women's side, there's 4 of the WTA top 10 missing, 5 of the top 20 most significant: Simona Halep, Sofia Kenin, Bianca Andreescu, Serena Williams, and Victoria Azarenka. Kieran, what are your thoughts on what sort of impact those withdrawals of these big name players could have on the tournament? And it is a bit surprising seeing a big tournament without some of these so many stars.
Yeah, well, I think it's got a very Masters 1000 feel about the draft. I think about half of the top 10 is kind of what you'd expect to see in 1000 events in both men's and women's. And you know, it's still an Olympic gold medal carries a lot of weight. There's brilliant players there. You know, Djokovic, Medvedev, Tsitsipas, like enough of the top players in the world, and on the women's side as well. Barty, the return of Naomi Osaka, Barbara Krejcikova. So you know, 2 of the most recent Grand Slam champions on the women's side. So it's a very good draw. I think the whole Olympics has been affected by the pandemic. There's a lot of big athletes that have unfortunately had to miss out on something they've been training for 5 years across many disciplines. So you know, it's still going to be a really enjoyable tournament, and it's still, I don't think it devalues what an Olympic gold medal would mean to any of these players.
No, agreed. So let's get into the draws. We can start on the women's singles side and go through who you think are going to be the 4 quarterfinal matchups. So Kieran, who have you got as your 2 quarterfinalists in that top quarter?
Yeah, I've gone with once again the 2 most recent Slam winners are in this one section, and I've gone with that for the quarterfinal: Ash Barty versus Barbara Krejcikova. I mean, Krejcikova, she followed up the French Open with a fairly strong run at Wimbledon on that very different surface, and like you say, won won the title recently as well. So coming into the tournament on very good form, you'd think is there an element of burnout, possibly. But I don't think that'll be too big of an issue. Once again, you could say that for Ash Barty because it's such a short space of time since Wimbledon, and she's come through 7 rounds at Wimbledon and won the tournament. So could there be an element of burnout there? But once again, I do see her as the favourite to come through that section. That there's good players in there. Belinda Bencic, Avila, Jessica Pegula. I'll shout out Heather Watson as well, of course. So I think even Sorribes Tomo is quite an awkward first round for Barty, but one that she probably gets through. So a solid section. I see that being the quarterfinal though.
Yeah, I've got the same matchup as you there, and yeah, I would agree with a lot of what you covered there. I think Sorribes Tomo could be a tricky first one for Barty. She's had a really good year. She's a really tough competitor, but also probably Sevastova in the second round can be a tricky player. Pavlyuchenkova maybe in the third round, as you mentioned, Heather Watson, another possible player. But I think Barty would definitely. I would expect Barty to come through the quarterfinal, and for Krejcikova, I mean, she's really had a fantastic year overall. Even before the French Open, she was having a good year, but then she's backed it up since, a good run at Wimbledon and winning that title. And yeah, she's shown strong performances on all surfaces. I think Zarina Diaz in the first round should come through, and then possibly Yastremska or Leila Fernandez in the second round could be more difficult. As you mentioned, Bencic, or I'd say Pegula maybe most likely the third round opponent, given she's had a fantastic year, especially on hard courts. But yeah, I would go with Krejcikova to come through to meet Barty then the first quarterfinal. So moving through into the next section in the top half, how do you see that one playing out?
Yeah, well, I think the top half of that. So looking into maybe the third round, I've gone with the seeds, I believe, with Arina Sabalenka and Rybakina in that third round. I think Sabalenka, we talked about how she's had such great winning form across WTA tournaments, but she'd never really could string many wins together in a slam, but she corrected that at Wimbledon, getting all the way to the semi-final. And I think off the back of that, coming into the Olympics, which probably sort of in meaning is closer to a Grand Slam than it is, your WTA 1000s, 500s, where she's shown great form before. I think that'll have spurred her on, and she's a brilliant player. She's been playing well for so long now, so I think now she's over that old slam hoodoo thing. I see her coming through that third round against Rybakina. Then moving on to the bottom half of that section, 2 names stand out from here. Once again, the seeds, the top seeds in that section, Petra Kvitova and Gabina Muguruza. Kudermetova, quite an awkward first round for Muguruza, but once again, I'd probably see her coming through it. She had that brilliant start to the season, but I think form has dropped, especially recently. She's still getting a couple of wins together, managing consecutive wins, but rather than getting to finals, she's getting to second rounds, third rounds. But looking at this, it's in Japan. I can imagine on hard courts. I can imagine it's quite similar to those Dubai kind of events in that part of the world. In how courts are going to play. So maybe she will find some of that early season form. But Petra Kvitova, I think she massively leads the head-to-head against Muguruza, including the title in Qatar. They played the final. Kvitova won that. So I'd have that as a third round, but I think I'd probably have to go with Petra Kvitova on just that head-to-head. Once again, Kvitova, other than the Qatar title, I wouldn't say she's had the strongest season. But like I say, it's a head-to-head, a 5-1 head-to-head. You've got to back who's winning that. So I've got a Sabalenka Kvitova quarterfinal from that.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a slight difference on this one. I've also gone for Sabalenka, but I've gone for Gabi Muguruza. Just with Sabalenka's section, agreeing with a lot of what you said. She's got a great record outside of the slams, and obviously now she'll be feeling confident after that great Wimbledon run, and particularly on hard courts. The results have been so impressive. So I think obviously Rybakina looks like the biggest hurdle there in the third round. They played a really tough match at Wimbledon with Sabalenka winning in 3 sets. That'll be a tough battle, but our back end also, she's had some great performances in the past for Belarus in the Fed Cup, or the Billie Jean Cup as it is now. So she's got a good record representing the country, possibly brings the best out of her. So yeah, I've got Sabalenka to come through there, and I've just gone with Muguruza. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a tough draw. I think Kudermetova first up is not going to be an easy one, but I would like it come through it. And like you said, I think she's form has dropped off a bit. I think part of that due to injuries starting in the clay court season. But I think, yeah, maybe a little bit of a disappointing loss to Jabeur at Wimbledon. But I think Jabeur was playing really, really well. And I just think we'll see a stronger tournament from here from Muguruza. I do think, yeah, it's a tough one, that Kvitova third round with the head to head. But I just yeah, like you were saying with Kvitova not having the best year, and particularly of late, from I think from about Madrid onwards, it's been a real struggle for her. I mean, I think she's had an injury issue as well. Obviously, she lost first round of Wimbledon and then first round of Prague. So I'm just really not sure Kvitova's still 100% at the moment. So I'll just go with Muguruza there. But yeah, it's definitely a tough one. If we do get that third round match, it would be hard to look past Kvitova. But I just think Muguruza probably in better shape right now. So moving into the bottom half of the draw, who have you got as the two players who'd be playing out that third quarterfinal?
I think I've gone with Ons Jabeur versus Maria Sakkari quarterfinal. It's a section with a few good players. You're looking at Karolina Pliskova off the back of that Wimbledon final. You it's difficult to back against her, but I think that Ons Jabeur second round tie, that'll be a fantastic match if it happens in the second round. And I think I'm probably giving it to Jabeur based on kind of she's been performing above everyone's expectations of her this season, and also Karolina Pliskova. You may see a bit of a post Wimbledon slump. I'm thinking maybe sort of a la Tsitsipas since the Roland Garros final. He's really struggled, and you don't know whether that disappointment of losing a Grand Slam final is going to carry over. I think it may be a fitness issue with Tsitsipas, but I do think that could be an element of his recent form, and I could see a similar thing happening with Pliskova. So I've got Ons Jabeur to come through that second round tie with Pliskova, and I suppose Jennifer Brady's the other main factor in that half of section 3, and I'd see her coming through that one on current form as well. And then in the bottom half of section 3, I think the main threat I've seen for Maria Sakkari is maybe Kontaveit in the first round, or Alya Tomljanovic in the third round. She's going by Elena Monfils now, isn't she?
Well, she's changed the name, but I think in tournament draws it's still down to Svitolina. So
right.
I'm not sure.
Well, Svitolina, we know that she's been a bit up and down since maybe last year even with her form. She's getting wins, but often it's second round, third round of tournaments, not really semi-finals, finals. So Tomljanovic coming off a much better Wimbledon, I'd see her as maybe a factor in this half of section 3. But I think whether it's Tomljanovic, whether it's Svitolina, I would see Maria Sakkari coming through those matches. We've talked about Sakkari a lot based on her form in 2020 and her form at the start of 2021. She managed to back that up with a semi-final at Roland Garros. I think it is kind of she's emerging as a top player. She's and we will see her put together really strong runs going forward more often.
Yeah, for sure. Agree on Sakkari, and so I've half agreed with you with this section. The player I have done that with is Sakari, but for the first player I've got Karolina Pliskova, and yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one. That in the second round, Pliskova against Ons Jabeur. That's if Pliskova comes through Elise Cornet first up, not necessarily an easy one, but I'd back it to come through it. And yeah, Ons Jabeur obviously in fantastic form, seems to be improving all the time. Has had a really strong year, just also coming off a strong Wimbledon. Head to head, there's just 2-1 at Pliskova, but they're all tight 3-set matches. So I think that really would be a tough one to call. And Jabeur definitely has a game that could disrupt Pliskova with the variety, but I would just go with Pliskova because I think she definitely did find something during the grass court season, particularly obviously at Wimbledon. And I think I could see her having a decent run here. So I would just have it come through that one. And as you said, in the third round, Jennifer Brady will be the seed there. Also, I would say Ostapenko is also in there, who's been probably in better form. I would say maybe could come through, but I would just back Pliskova to get through it. It is a tough draw though. For sure, could see Jabeur and Ostapenko having a chance. And Sakari, yeah, echoing a lot of what you said. I mean, definitely a player I think we both rate highly. She's had some very strong results. And I think a player who's capable on all surfaces, but hard court's her best surface. We've seen some really strong results from her on the hard courts, reaching the semi-finals in Miami earlier in the year. And again, I think representing Greece, playing for a country, could bring the best out of her. Speak a lot about it, saying this is Olympics is the highlight of the year. So she's obviously going to be putting a lot into this event, and I think it's going to be a tough first round one against Kontaveit, who I think's number 28 in the world. I mean, that's a really tough first round draw, but I think 4-3 head to head in Sakari's favor, tough one. But I'll just back her there. Possibly Habino in the second round, a Japanese player. And as you said, Svitolina in the third round. They've played 3 times, all on hard courts. Sakari winning 2. So I'll just give it the edge. Tomljanovic, as you mentioned, a player who definitely could upset Svitolina potentially, but Svitolina just not had a great year, particularly at the big tournaments where you'd expect her to be someone who usually reaches the quarterfinals or at least the 4th round, and we've seen her fall in the second and third round quite often. So I just think Sakari is more likely there. And so into the final quarter of the women's draw, the bottom quarter, who do you think is going to come through the last day there?
So I think I've gone with Iga Swiatek versus Naomi Osaka quarterfinal here. I think the two of them are really good friends, aren't they? And we've only met once on the WTA tour, so would be a great match to see. I was really stuck for calling the Iga Swiatek Elise Mertens possible third round tie. It's just Swiatek, we know that her best surface is clay, but she has shown strong results on other surfaces. But Elise Mertens maybe has a bit more pedigree on hard courts, a few more years on them, and had good runs in slams on hard courts. They've never met, so there was no head-to-head to compare here, so that made it more awkward. But I think when in doubt, just go with the seeds. That's what I do. So I've gone with Iga Swiatek to come through that into the quarterfinal. I think Naomi has a relatively nice draw. I think an out-of-form Kiki Bertens is the other high seed out of her half of Section 4, so Alison Risk could also be a possible third-round opponent. I'd see Osaka coming through either of those. There is probably a question of how will she be returning after a bit of time away, but considering she played a first round of the French Open, won that, and that's not even that long ago, really. It's not that much time away because it's been such a stacked period of the season with the home crowd on her side as well. I see Osaka definitely coming through her half of section 4 into that Swiatek quarterfinal.
Yeah, I've gone for the same quarterfinal matchup here, which I think would be a fascinating one. If we do get it, would like to see it. And so yeah, on Swiatek's draw, I think a decent first couple of rounds against Bartel and Paula Badoza, who's had a really good year, but I think definitely best on clay. I'd see Swiatek come through the third round and agree that Elise Mertens would be a tough test. I think who'd most likely in the third round is also put in Seva and Alexandrova in there, so quite a lot of good players in that section, but Mertens most likely in the third round. But I would go with Iga just to come through that. I think it would be a tough match though. As you said, I think probably even a different level she's out on clay, but she's also had some strong results on other surfaces. So I think she'll get through there. And Osaka, yeah, maybe I suppose you could say a little bit of an unknown given her absence. But I mean, on hard courts, she's just been outstanding. I think she's been completely a level above on hard courts. It's what she's been on other surfaces, and she's been the dominant player at Grand Slams, the biggest events on hard courts of the last few years, winning the Australian and US Open twice each. So, yeah, I do think she'll come through. Like you said, it's a pretty good draw. I think Zheng Golubic, who's had a good year, but I'll be surprised if she could pull off that upset. And in the third round, I would say possibly Vondrousova is the most likely there. As you mentioned, Burtons is in there, but it's just been so short of matches and wins. I think he's had a lot of physical issues and is actually planning to retire soon. I think Kiki Burtons risk is capable, but hasn't had great results of late. So I think probably Vondrousova in the third round and Osaka to come through the quarters. So interesting there. We'll come back to people who think we'll get through at the end of the tournament, but we'll move first on to the men's draw now and see who we think is going to come to the 4 quarterfinal matchups there. So under the top half of the men's draw, how do you see that first quarter playing out?
I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion how this plays out for me, especially the top half of section 1. I don't see Hugo Dean, especially on hard courts, as being at all a problem for Djokovic. Jan-Lennard Struff is a very good player with a great pedigree. He's done good stuff in the game, but it's Novak Djokovic, and Djokovic leads that head-to-head with Jan-Lennard Struff, I think 5 love. So he's not had a problem so far for me. So then you move into that third round. I think the most likely in that third round maybe Lorenzo Musetti. Yeah, his best results on the senior tour have come on clay, but I think he's a US Open junior finalist, so he has got some pedigree on hard courts. He's picked up a couple of hard court wins in Masters 1000s events. Or maybe Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, once again, another young player whose best results have been on clay, but has some pedigree on hard courts as well, can pick up wins on that surface. I think that's where you start to think maybe a shot could happen, especially in best of 3 sets against sort of young players, too really physically fit young players as well. We know Musetti almost surprised Djokovic at Roland Garros when went 2 sets up and then went out with a whimper, ended up withdrawing because he said he had no chance to win. He wasn't even withdrawing because of an injury. Which was a shame to see after even if you lose 3-2 in best of 5 against Djokovic, having lost the last 3 sets quite convincingly, to take 2 sets off Djokovic is an excellent result. You shouldn't pull out of that match. But he's a young lad, he's learning, and I think those players could surprise a shock in best of 3, but I don't see it happening. I'd see Djokovic coming through it into a quarterfinal against Andrei Rublev. A difficult first round against Kei Nishikori. I think Kei's starting to get a few results together after he had a long time out of injury, didn't he? But I think he's starting to find his fitness, get some results, and he'll have the home crowd on his side. But I see Rublev coming through his half of the section. There's Gael Monfils is the other main factor in there, the other high seed, but we know Gael's results haven't been brilliant recently. Federico Coria obviously had a very good run recently, but his best results tend to come on clay. So I'd see Rublev coming through into that quarterfinal, no problem. Setting up that quarterfinal that we thought we were going to have at Wimbledon, the first meeting between Rublev and Djokovic. It'd be good to finally see those 2 play against each other.
Yeah, I agree. It would be good to see that, and I think we'll get it this time. We'll see we came close at Wimbledon with Rublev just losing in the 4th round to Fucsovics. But yeah, I've gone with it as well, and I agree. I think Djokovic's draw, I can't see any problems there. I mean, Delian in the first round, it's probably as kind of draws you could get, with all respect to Delian. And Struff in the second round is a very good player, but I think he's dangerous. He's got weapons, but it's not a matchup that tends to work well. Someone who just with baseline power against Djokovic, and as you mentioned, the head-to-head, I don't see any change there. And the third round, I mean, I think you can make a case for Davidovich, Musetti, or even John Millman getting there, given he's a solid player, a good competitor. He'll really be up for it and good on hard courts. But yeah, I would maybe just say Davidovich Fokina the most likely. And I mean, he did have a good run at the US Open last year, I think, to the round of 16. So possibly he could get there, but I don't see Djokovic being overly troubled in those first 3 rounds. As you mentioned, Musetti definitely a real talent and did have a good run in Acapulco this year on hard courts to the semis, so he could be someone to watch out for. And Rublev's draw, I realize, is a really interesting first round one against Nishikori. I did hover over Nishikori for a second there. I think if anyone's going to come to the quarters that isn't Rublev, I think it could be Nishikori, so it could be a crucial first round match. But I would just go with Rublev, even though Nishikori won their only previous meet, and I think it was in 2018, where he was probably at a higher level than he was now, and Rublev was at a lower level. And as you said, we've seen some good signs from Nishikori, some positive results, but without really looking back to his very best yet. So I would still just go with Rublev then. I believe that there aren't going to be fans, I think, as it stands, unless something changes there. So that could be a bit of a blow for Nishikori not having the crowd, unless something changes there. And yeah, I think Marcos Giron in the second round, he's had a good season, rose up the rankings, and I believe the top 80 now. As you mentioned, Monfils, we just haven't seen the real Gael Monfils since early 2020. So I'll probably say Ivashka is the most likely to get the third round. He's had a really solid year. He's put together some good results and climbed the rankings a bit. As you mentioned, Coria in there, he's had some good results on clay, but probably not at his best here. So I'd say probably Ivashka, Monfils an outside chance, but Rublev to come through and meet Djokovic. So on to the next core in that top half. Who do you see coming through that one?
Yeah, I think I'm going to touch on. I think I mentioned Osaka having the home fans on her side as well, and there's definitely not going to be fans there with this late. There's no way that tickets get sold for these matches. I suppose what I mean is home tournament motivation. Just sure. We know that being at the home Olympics is going to mean a lot to them, whether there's fans in the crowds or not. But I'll move on to this section, correcting my mistake there. I really like section 2. There's a lot of solid players in there. Your seeds are Alexander Zverev, Lorenzo Sonego, Aslan Karatsev, Hubert Hurkacz, all players that would produce interesting matches against each other. And even the non-seeds, you've got Nikos Basilashvili, you've got Jeremy Chardy, players that have had good results in the past, and definitely could spring a few surprises. I do really like this section, but I think I'm going to go with an Alexander Zverev and maybe an Aslan Karatsev quarter-final. Once again, maybe these courts, these hard courts in Japan are going to be very similar to sort of your Dubais, your Qatars that we had earlier in the season, similar part of the world. And Aslan Karatsev, that was a point in the season where he was showing really strong results. You could even say it's comparable to Australia as well, where Karatsev obviously showed strong results. It's also best of 3. I think Karatsev was playing really good tennis on best of 3 on hard courts earlier in the season. It is after that fantastic early season breakout, we have seen him kind of drop off a bit now. But Hubert Hurkacz is coming off a really tough run at Wimbledon where he did excellently well. Karatsev is maybe a little bit fresher owing to the fact he was going out very early in those grass court tournaments. So I think I'll have Karatsev to come through any match he has with Hurkacz. I think that's the most likely third round. And I'll have Zverev to come through tough ties with the likes of Basilashvili and Lorenzo Sonego, and that to be a very interesting quarterfinal tie.
Yeah, I think it will be. And I've also gone with that. I've gone for Zverev against Karatsev as the quarterfinal, and yeah, just going through Zverev's section, I think it's a good draw for Zverev. I agree there are some interesting players in that. I think first 2 rounds are pretty straightforward in Jensen Liu and Galan Riveros. I think you couldn't ask for much better than that. Then I think Sonego most likely in the third round, but definitely Basilashvili's capable. Also Taro Daniel in there, a home player. Corbel's Bayana, but I'd say probably Sonego. Basilashvili definitely has a chance, but I think Zverev would be too strong for any of those guys. And the next section down is a tough one to call. I mean, I've been guilty of overlooking Hurkacz in the past, and he's gone on to really have some great results, including Wimbledon. And Miami, I kind of thought he would lose every match in that run, about 4 or 5 in a row, and he went on to take the title. But as we saw after Miami, he had a great result. He had a bit of a struggle after that. He's just had a great result at Wimbledon, so he has been a little bit up and down. Although I do think his best results are on the quicker surfaces, hard course and grass. And he might enjoy the conditions here, but I just think, I think you made a really good point about Karatsev's results in Asia and Australia earlier in the season. I think that could be a factor. And also, we're going to see probably warm conditions here, like there were in the Australian summer earlier in the year. And he just had a fantastic run in Australia, Dubai, and he had a decent run in Miami as well. Okay, we haven't seen much from him in recent months, but I think that's been because he's probably not the same proposition on clay and grass that he is on hard courts. I think he really has shown at least on the ATP tour and on the Challenger tour last year, he's had some fantastic results on hard courts. So I can see him coming through there. Tommy Paul, Shardy, challenging, but I think he'll be too good. And Hurkacz, yeah, that's the tough one. But I'll mention that Hurkacz has also got Molten Fucsovic in the first round, which is a really tough draw. Potentially, he's a player who's had good results on all surfaces, but again, especially hard courts. No guarantee he would come through that. I would just back Karatsev to come through and meet Zverev. So going into the bottom half of the men's singles, how do you see that one shaping up?
Yeah, so section? My section 3 quarterfinal, I think I've gone a bit left of field here. I've gone with Ugo Humbert versus Karen Khachanov. We've got a possible second round repeat of that Tsitsipas Tier 4 tie that we saw in the first round of Wimbledon. It's weird that those are coming up in the very early rounds of tournaments at the moment. Like I say, Tsitsipas seems to be in the middle of a bit of a slump at the moment. And, you know, we remember how that Tier 4 match went at Wimbledon. But I think all slumps must come to an end. He's too good of a player not to bring that to an end. And I would see him maybe coming at least into the third round. But I think Ugo Humbert has also shown quite strong results this year. He got the title in Halle. So I'd say he has... there's no real form players in this section. That's the problem in this half of the section, because Ugo Humbert won that title, followed it up with a first round exit. Tsitsipas, final of Roland Garros, been going out early in tournaments ever since. Tier 4, you know, very talented player, gets good wins at times, but doesn't string many great runs together. So it's really hard to call, but I'm going to go with Ugo Humbert, just because of the feeling, pretty much. But I've done the bottom half of section 3 before the top half. I think the top half, Diego Schwartzman. I don't think he's getting, once again, reasonable results this year, but not brilliant results. I think the quarterfinal of Roland Garros, possibly his strongest run. Came up against Rafa, so you can't hold that against him. But I think on hard courts this year, was it the fourth round of the Australian Open where he lost to Karatsev? A solid run once again, but not brilliant. I think Karen Khachanov is coming into a little bit of form. We know he had a bit of a slump after getting his hands on a Masters 1000 title a couple of years back, but where we went on to predict him to do quite well. I think everyone thought maybe he could do quite big things after that. Had that slump, but he seems to be back on it now. He's been stringing some good runs together. So I've got an Khachanov versus Ugo Humbert quarterfinal there.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I agree. This is a really tough one to call. I've ended up going with the seeds in Diego Schwartzman and Stefanos Tsitsipas, but I don't feel that's necessarily a confident bet. I mean, just on Schwartzman's section, I think he's got a good first couple of rounds with in Varias and Gel Souza most likely in the second round, and then it would be that potential meeting with Khachanov in the third round. There's also Khachanov has Yoshida Nishioka first up, which could be an interesting one. He's good results on hard courts, obviously playing at home, and James Duckworth in there, who's had some solid results. But I think Khachanov would get through into that match with Schwartzman, and head-to-head's 2-1 Schwartzman, but they've been close matches. I think all on hard courts. It's a tough one to call. I mean, as you said, Schwartzman away from clay hasn't had the greatest year, but I think I would just back him there. I mean, Khachanov, he's had a good run there at Wimbledon, but it sort of came out of nowhere. And on grass, being a bit different at the conditions here, it's hard to predict whether he's going to back it up out. So I'll just go with Schwartzman. I think he'll maybe be a bit more solid there. And I've just gone with Tsitsipas. I agree with you. I think I'm still not entirely sure whether he's gone over the French Open final. I mean, but the same, I think it was partly that at Wimbledon and partly the fact that he does have a bit of a problem on grass. I think he's just a much better player on clay and even on hard courts than he is on grass at this stage. So I think that was partly, there were a few factors there, and also Tiafoe being a tough draw and an inspired opponent. So he did play in Hamburg on clay last week, which I thought was maybe a bit strange ahead of the Olympics, but maybe he wanted to get back out there and get some more match practice because there weren't any hardcore events going on last week. So he got the quarters there. And yeah, he still looked to be a bit frustrated on court. He lost to Krajinovic, which, I mean, he's a good player, but wasn't the greatest result. But I just think we'll see him bounce back a bit here because I think he's got a reasonable draw. Kohlschreiber first up, and then Tiafoe in the second round is tough, but I think I would swing it just a bit more back in his favor on the hard courts. And then, as you mentioned, Humbert most likely in the third round would be a tough one. I'll just back him to come through there though, and bounce back from his disappointing grass court season. So I've got Tsitsipas to meet Schwartzman in the quarterfinals, but definitely there's a few players who could get through in that section. So moving into the final section, which is a really interesting one, maybe one of the most in either draw. How do you see that one playing out?
Well, come on, Andy is the first point here, but the problem is I just don't want to try and manifest anything. So I've gone with Daniil Medvedev versus Maran Cilic quarterfinal, and the reason I've come to that is because otherwise I'd either be backing Felix Auger-Aliassime, but if I was backing Felix Auger-Aliassime, that means I'm sending Andy Murray out in the first round, and I really don't want to do that. But then I don't want to predict Murray to get to the quarterfinal because I feel that'd be jinxing him. That'd be saying, I expect Andy to get to the quarterfinal, and it's just you can't really expect that at the moment. So I've gone with Maran Cilic partly to be neutral, but partly there's a bit of a science behind this because he won Stuttgart. And he beat Felix Auger-Aliassime in the final of Stuttgart. So he's found, he's been dropping down the rankings. He's getting past his best maybe, but he's been an incredible player throughout his career. And I'm sure he's still got a few good results left in him, a few good tournaments left in him for definite. And I feel like he could have a fairly solid run. I think Medvedev in coming through that bottom half of the section is a bit of a foregone conclusion for me. We know how good he is on hard courts. We know how strong he's been in best of 3 sets tournaments on hard courts. He's a couple of Masters titles to his name, the ATP finals. And you're looking at some of the players in his section. Bublik, very talented player. Could be a problem in the first round, but you'd still expect Medvedev to deal with that easily. Fabio Fognini is a possible third round opponent. Once again, definitely capable of springing a surprise, but I feel that Medvedev's kind of got that level of. It is a bit brutal. He's a bit like Djokovic. He comes up against these talented players who you say they could do something, and then he just gets that result. So I'm going with Daniil Medvedev for definite.
This is a really interesting one. And I agree with you in saying that you can't expect Andy Murray to get the quarterfinals, but I've gone for it anyway. I've gone for Murray against Medvedev. So just first on the Murray section, I mean, yeah, it is such a difficult one to call. I think there's 4 players you can make a strong case for here, but Auger-Aliassime in the first round is a really tough one. I do rate Felix very highly, but I think. Although we've seen fantastic results from on grass, I think he probably is better on grass than he is on other surfaces at this point. And probably you'd say this year his results before the grass were maybe slightly disappointing. He did okay on the hard course, I suppose, in Australia. He got to a final before the Australian Open, then made the 4th round. So he didn't do too badly there, I guess, in similar conditions. But I just think in best of 3, I would give Murray a real chance. I mean, obviously has the amazing Olympics record. Maybe, he was a different player then, and different conditions. But he's got a good record in Asian conditions as well. He's won in Shanghai and Beijing in the past. I just think best of three. I think he will really be up for this. I think he will probably have taken a lot from his Wimbledon run, getting a couple of wins there, and just getting a bit of confidence back. I heard him saying recently that he's feeling as well as he has since the injury in 2017, and he's been as healthy as he has been for a period of time. So I think hopefully we'll see as good a version as we've seen of him since 2017, perhaps as well, like when he won the Antwerp title in 2019. I think that would be good enough to have a run. Yeah, but that is a really tough first round. Then you'd have possibly Kepfer in the second round. And I agree with you. Cilic is definitely someone that it would be easy to overlook in this section, but shouldn't be. And I think another reason for that is Cilic and Krenia Busta most likely meet in the second round. Cilic leads that head-to-head 4-love, so I definitely think Cilic could come through there. Krenia Busta coming in off his Hamburg title, which was a great win, and I think is arguably an even better player on hard courts. But I would say Cilic to get through there. But I'll just back Murray to beat Cilic as well in the third round. It's a tough one to call, but I think he's got a pretty good record against him. And like you said, I would say Medvedev almost a foregone conclusion. Yeah, I mean, Bublik first up is a challenging one, but I think thought the same thing at the French Open in the first round, and he dismantled them. Probably tougher proposition on hard courts, but again, Medvedev's a level above on hard courts for sure. And like you mentioned, I think since 2019 he's been second only to Djokovic in terms of his hardcore results. Pretty much outstanding at virtually everywhere he's played, particularly the big events. I think he's won 3 Masters 1000s, the ATP finals, and made 2 Slam finals on hard courts. So I can't look past Medvedev here. Fabio Fognini, the most likely third round opponent, extremely talented, but I think on hard courts, definitely Medvedev would be too strong, and he would come through that quarterfinal potentially against Andy Murray. So moving into how we see the tournament, the back end of the tournament playing out from the quarterfinals onwards, we'll switch back over to the women's draw, and who do you see winning the 4 quarterfinal matchups that you've picked?
So I've gone with Ash Barty to beat Barbara Krejcikova in the Section 1 quarterfinal. I think back to that match at Wimbledon. Was that the quarterfinal as well, or the fourth round?
I think it was fourth round.
Yeah. Ash Barty won that, and I predicted to win this one as well. I could see it being an interesting match, but I just see Ash Barty coming through it. Between Arina Sabalenka and Petra Kvitova, tough one to call. I think it's a 2-all head-to-head. But just once again, off the back of a very strong Wimbledon result, and Petra Kvitova, like you say, I think she's maybe been carrying an injury at times. She's struggled to perform definitely very recently. I see Arina Sabalenka winning that one. My Section 3 women's quarterfinal, I had Ons Jabeur versus Maria Sakkari, and I've got Maria Sakkari to win that one. I feel just for Sakkari, I don't know. It's more. This is less scientific, like other picks where I've gone with head-to-head and form on certain surfaces. I think this is just a feeling that Sakkari has a strong run coming. And between Iga Swiatek, Naomi Osaka, I'd see that being a really interesting match. In fact, once, which Osaka won, and I'd see definitely on hard courts Naomi Osaka winning again, but maybe going all the way to 3 sets.
Yeah, so some interesting ones there, and I've also gone with Ash Barty to beat Krejcikova in the first quarterfinal, which I think would be an interesting one. I mean, Krejcikova also in fantastic form, but I think definitely I can bet against Barty at this point. As you mentioned, the meeting at Wimbledon, which is a good match. Barty won fairly convincingly in straight sets. I'd also have Sabalenka to come through, but against Gabi Muguruza, who I've got in that matchup. I think, I feel Sabalenka will have a strong tournament here. I think, which I don't know if I mentioned before, she's had some strong results in Asia before, I think in China. So in similar types of conditions, probably a bit hotter now than usually when the Asian swing would be. But I just think, I would back Sabalenka there over Muguruza, which I think would be a really good match to watch and an interesting one, but definitely has been in the stronger form of late. And then Pliskova against Sakkari is a really tough one to call. I've just gone with, I've also gone with Sakkari to reach the semifinals and beat Pliskova. I think that'll be another interesting match. I think Sakkari just has so much in a game, such a great athlete. Possibly we're going to see in warm conditions. Possibly I've heard someone say talking about the ball being slow, possibly. I think that could help her. The way she can defend, she could possibly frustrate Pliskova, but it would be a tough one. I'll just go with it there. Like you said, I think I just have a feeling she could do really well this tournament. And I would also go with Naomi Osaka to beat Iga Swiatek, as you mentioned, winning that only previous encounter. I think it would be a really interesting one to watch, but I couldn't bet against Osaka, as you mentioned before. Still, the feeling of playing at a home Olympics, such a unique opportunity, and on a surface where she's been pretty dominant at the big events. I think she'll get through that the last four. So into those semi-finals, how do you see it playing out from there in terms of who's reaching the gold medal match and who then potentially would win the bronze medal match?
So I've got Ash Barty to beat Arina Sabalenka, but it was a really tough one because they've played 8 times and they've split the head-to-head 4-4. Usually when they've played, you've got 8 meetings between players, you finally get to see one clear favourite in the head-to-head. But 4-all makes it difficult to call. You also question, does fatigue come into play with Ash Barty? But also Sabalenka went far at Wimbledon as well, so you can't really say that an extra match or two is going to be that big of a factor. So I'd still probably just go being buoyed by that win at Wimbledon, just having shown strong results all year as well. I'd go with Ash Barty. And the Maria Sakkari versus Naomi Osaka semi-final. Once again, the head-to-head's not giving you much. Osaka leads at 3-2 after 5 meetings. Sakkari has been quite an awkward opponent for Naomi in the past. And won the most recent meeting, actually, which was towards the start of 2020, I believe. So quite a while ago. But yeah, Naomi Osaka, she's established herself as probably the best clay court, not clay court, the best hard court player in the WTA. So I'd say that you've got to back Osaka, but once again, a very interesting tie that could go either way. So I've got an Ash Barty versus Naomi Osaka final from that. And Maria Sakkari versus Arina Sabalenka in the bronze medal match. That's another really tough one to call. I'm going to go with Sabalenka. Just once again, coming off the back of a stronger result at Wimbledon. So yeah, I'll have Sabalenka getting a bronze medal for Belarus, I believe, and in the final, I'm going to have Japan getting gold. They've got a 2-all head-to-head, which obviously doesn't help. There's too many close head-to-heads here that aren't helping the pick winners. The top 2 seeds of the tournament, it's a really difficult one to call, but Osaka representing Japan in Japan, I think on hard courts as well, I think she's going to win that. So gold for Japan, silver for Australia, and bronze for Belarus.
Yeah, well, I've got the same medals as you. I've also got the bye to beat Sabalenka in the first semi-final. I agree with you. I think it's been such a close head-to-head, and they've played a lot of times this year as well, which have all been really close matches. Bye, I think it's just had the better of it this year, so that being one of the reasons I would just go with Bye, and obviously she's got to be extremely confident after winning the Wimbledon title. I'll just give her the edge there, but I mean a tough one to call. And yeah, I'll go with the Osaka beat Sakkari again, as you mentioned, a close one. The Osaka just leading head-to-head, I think, by 1, but Sakkari winning that one in Miami pretty convincingly earlier in the year, I think, including a bagel. So it wouldn't be straightforward, but I think it's just hard to bet against Osaka at home on hard courts. I think this will be such a huge goal for her. As I mentioned, it's not an opportunity. It's a once in a career thing, if that, for a player to play at home Olympics. And yeah, I can see it coming through at the final and then beating Ash Barty in the final, which I think would be a fantastic final. I mean, between the top 2 seeds and probably the 2 best players, you'd say, in Grand Slams on the WTA in recent years. Osaka winning 4 and Barty winning 2, going back to the 29 French Open, and certainly 2 of the most consistent. So I think that would be a fantastic final. I would just go with Osaka on this surface. To bring the gold medal home for Japan, it would be a fantastic story in the bronze medal match. Yeah, I've also got Sabalenka to beat Sakari. I think it would be another really interesting matchup. But yeah, just Sabalenka's body of work on hard courts, just the power she brings. I couldn't look past her, and I think she'll be in a good mindset after the Wimbledon breakthrough she made at a Grand Slam, finally getting that past that fourth round, and as we mentioned, an extremely strong record outside of the slams. Sakari fell a bit earlier at Wimbledon, so maybe just the extra matches, the extra confidence Sabalenka has, and the extra power, I would give her the edge then the bronze medal match. So it would be a really interesting conclusion to the tournament if that happens, I think. So moving over on the men's draw, back to the quarterfinal matchups we've picked. How do you see those ones playing out?
Yeah, Djokovic, Rublev, like I've already said, really excited to finally see those two go up against each other. I think Rublev, with his really powerful hitting, especially off the forehand side, he's got tools that could be awkward for Djokovic, but you'd still say Djokovic deals with it in the end. I could see it going to 3 sets, but I can only really see a Djokovic win from that. Section 2, I think whether it's Aslan Karatsev, who I've gone with, or even Hubert Hurkacz, who I think is the other main shout in the quarterfinal, I just see Alexander Zverev coming through those matches. I feel like Zverev has shown a bit more solidity this year, especially I've always said he can kind of go for Boyle when things start to go against him. You know, I've questioned kind of his mentality at times in big matches. But I feel like he's massively improved in that regard. The second serve is still difficult. Like when that escapes him, you really see it starts causing problems. I think it caused him quite a few problems against Felix Auger-Aliassime at Wimbledon, actually. But I'd see him coming through into the semi-final. Khachanov Humbert, it's a quarter-final that I'm not sure will happen, but I've called it, and I think if it happens, I've got Khachanov to win that. Just buoyed off that good run at Wimbledon against Humbert, who kind of had a disappointing tournament after picking up the title in Halle. I feel like Khachanov's got a good chance there. And in section 4, Medvedev, Marin Cilic, it's a 2-0, 2-love head-to-head for Daniel Medvedev. And I'd see him making it 3-love. Cilic, he's a difficult opponent, but Medvedev, I think it's one that he deals with.
Yeah. So I've gone for, on the first one, the same outcome as you with Djokovic to beat Rublev, and agreed. I do hope we get to see that one. But not that I wouldn't begrudge Nishikori coming through there as well. His home tournament. I think it would be good to see either of those. But to see the Djokovic Rublev matchup finally, I think would be great, and on hard courts, which is the best service for both of them. It would be an interesting one. Rublev definitely has the power and the game to trouble anyone, I think, on this surface. But I just think, yeah, it could be tough for him against Djokovic in his first meeting, having no experience playing against Djokovic on hard courts. What actually is just going to make him play so many extra balls, and I think, yeah, it would take him some time probably to get used to that before he could actually win it. And Djokovic, on the quest that he's on for the first gold medal of his career and to keep the Golden Slam alive, I couldn't see it ending there. I'd have him to come through that one, but as you mentioned, I think it could be a tough one in best of 3. Rublev would definitely have more chance than at a slam. And yeah, I've also got Zverev to beat Aslan Karatsev. I do think Karatsev could cause problems, as could Hurkacz if it was him in that match, as you mentioned. But I think Zverev, yeah, he's put some solid results together really at the big tournaments. And yeah, I'll just back him to be just has the biggest serve there on hard courts. I'll back him to be a little bit more solid. As you mentioned, the double fault problem is still there, and it's hard to know when it's going to appear. I mean, I think he had 20 double faults in that Auger-Aliassime match you mentioned, which is obviously a huge concern. You just don't see that from top players, but you can seem to go through some tournaments without it really being an issue, and then it appears at other times. So it's hard to know when it's going to happen. But I'll just back him to beat Karatsev, and maybe with the defensive skills and the movement he's got to contain Karatsev's power a bit and frustrate him. I've seen some players do that to Karatsev at times, so I'd have Zverev coming through there. I'd have Tsitsipas to beat Schwartzman. Again, it's I think if we did get that matchup, I'd be fairly confident in Steph to win that one on hard courts. I think Schwartzman's had some good results on hard courts in the past, but we've seen Tsitsipas, an ATP Finals winner, a Masters 1000 finalist on the surface. I think, as we mentioned, I think he'll be really motivated here to bounce back from a disappointing Wimbledon and to fight for a medal. For Greece, he's talked about how much of a goal that is, and I think he'd be too strong there. I think he just has too many weapons for Schwartzman on hard courts on a surface like this. And also I'd have Daniel Medvedev to beat Andy Murray, which I think would be a really interesting match to watch, because actually I've heard some comparisons about certain aspects of Medvedev's game being compared to Murray. So I think it would be a really interesting one to watch, both having fantastic backhands, being excellent returners, playing deep behind the baseline, fantastic defensive skills. So I think that would be an interesting one to watch if Murray did come through there, but I would just I couldn't go against Medvedev. I think for Murray to get 3 wins, as we talked about earlier, would be a big ask, really, just to get that far. And he would have already had to have a couple of big wins together. I think Medvedev would probably just end the run there, even in best of 3. I think there would maybe still be some physical question marks over Murray, given his lack of matches this year. So I think it would be a fantastic result, even if he could get there. But I couldn't look past Medvedev. As we talked about, his hard court CV is outstanding. So moving into the semi-finals that you've got, how do you see those two playing out, and the gold and bronze medal matches?
So Djokovic Zverev, it's a 6-2 head-to-head in Djokovic's favour. That's not discounting Zverev. He could cause problems. I think he made a great start in that Australian Open match earlier in the year, but just fell off the boil a bit as Djokovic came into his own. But those 2 results that he's had over Djokovic, I think, came quite early in his career when he was really young and breaking through, fresh on the scene. And recently, I think, especially Djokovic has really established himself as dominant in that head-to-head. So a difficult one to call. Like Zverev, he does have some pedigree against Djokovic, but it all came, I think, back in 2018. So I'll have Djokovic to come through that match. Khachanov Medvedev, it's a 1-2 head-to-head in Medvedev's favour. Medvedev just the more solid player in general. So I'll have Medvedev coming through into the gold medal match, and Khachanov competing for a bronze.
Yeah, so I've also got Djokovic to beat Zverev. As you mentioned, I think Zverev has definitely got some elements in his game which can trouble Djokovic with the big serve and being hard to hit through. But yeah, as you mentioned, I think those 2 wins, I think the last one came in the ATP final in 2018. I think Djokovic has won the last 5. And there's been some close ones in there, but I just think Djokovic can expose some of Zverev's weaknesses in terms of now that, as we've talked about, the second serve problem that he has against the greatest returner of all time. You can't afford to have a bad day on second serve against Djokovic. You're going to get punished, and also he's able to find his forehand and just make him play uncomfortable shots that put him in uncomfortable positions that not many other players could. So I agree. I think it could be a tough one in best of 3. You'd give Zverev a chance, but I couldn't go against Djokovic. Obviously on an 18 match winning streak heading into this, going back to Belgrade before the French Open, I just think, to be honest, only he can beat himself at this point. And I would go with Medvedev to beat Tsitsipas in the other semi-final. I think that's a 6-2 head-to-head. And yeah, I think that one, it's not a misleading head-to-head that you see sometimes. You think, oh well, there have been some close ones in there, but I think, okay, Tsitsipas got that win at the French Open, which was a fantastic win, but I think it's clear he's a much better clay court player than Medvedev. I think on hard courts, it is in Medvedev's favour, and I think he still has the psychological edge over Tsitsipas. He struggles with that. The challenge of facing Medvedev a bit was in the Australian Open semi-finals this year, where Medvedev won in straight sets. I think just he finds it frustrating to play against Medvedev, who doesn't give him pace, and it's just extremely difficult to hit through, but also has a huge serve and is difficult to break, which returning has been a problem for Tsitsipas on the quicker surfaces. So I think there's a reason that matchup has gone the way it has, and I couldn't go against it, that continuing here. So moving on to the bronze medal match and the final, the gold medal match that you've picked. How do you see them playing out?
So I see a medal for Germany in the bronze medal match. Obviously, Achinov to be in that match is quite an outside shout. I know that, and Alexander Zverev, just a more solid game in general. Like I say, we've both touched on it. The double fault issue, the second serve issue is kind of the only thing that hangs over him maybe, and then just maybe a question of his temperament at times. But other than that, he's pretty much got a very solid game. So he's one of the top players in the world at the moment. I think I'd see him picking up a bronze medal for Germany. And then the gold medal match. You know what? When I started doing these predictions, I just felt I was leaning towards a foregone conclusion for Novak Djokovic again. And then I looked at that final, Djokovic Medvedev, best of 3 sets on hard courts. And I honestly think that final's difficult to call. I think it's almost impossible to call. Djokovic leads a head-to-head 5-3. But if you look specifically at best of 3 matches, Medvedev leads it 3-2, and I think all those matches have come on hard courts. So it's a match I could see going either way. We know Medvedev's been an awkward opponent for Djokovic. He's being compared to, you mentioned, I've seen the Murray comparisons as well, but I've also seen people compare Medvedev to Djokovic, which, that makes sense, as Djokovic and Murray were always compared as quite similar players as well. So yeah, both just so solid from the baseline, the defensive game, spot on. Both got 2 of the best double-handed backhands in the game at the moment. Djokovic maybe more solid at the net at the moment, but we've seen the improvement in the Djokovic serve. Medvedev has more naturally a brilliant serve, but both of them have a very effective serve at the moment. It's almost impossible to call, but like I say, when it's impossible to call, go with the seeds, and it's the 1 and 2 seeds, so I'll give it to the number 1 seed, Novak Djokovic. Also chasing that calendar year Golden Slam, chasing history, and just how unbeatable he's looked in 2021 specifically. I think I'm going to go with Djokovic, but it was a difficult one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've gone for the same 3 medalists as you again. So I've obviously got a slightly different second semi-final. I've got Zverev to beat Tsitsipas in that bronze medal match between the 2 losing semi-finalists. I think even though Tsitsipas does lead that head-to-head quite convincingly, I just think, I don't know, I've just got a feeling Zverev could have a good tournament here. And as we mentioned about Tsitsipas, not necessarily being back to his best after the French. Like I said, I could see him having a good run, but maybe not quite coming over with the medal. I think Zverev again does have the biggest serve, and I just think he could edge that one. It's a tough one to call, given the head-to-head in Tsitsipas's favour, but on hard courts, so Tsitsipas did win it in the French Open semis. I'll just go with Zverev here. And yeah, again, I agree with you with the final. The gold medal match is an extremely tough one to call in best of 3. Well, I mean, I found it a tough one to call before the Australian Open final in best of 5, and it didn't turn out to be a match like that. But I think in best of 3, it is hard to see it being a one-sided contest or an easy to call contest. I've also gone with Djokovic to win it, but for all the reasons you mentioned, I think Medvedev, more than anyone, has the tools to give Djokovic a lot of problems on hard courts. Yeah, like you say, he has the fantastic serve. If he has a good serving day, even for Djokovic is very difficult to break, and he's a good enough returner to get into Djokovic's service games if he's not serving at his absolute best, and possibly not in the quickest conditions here. Could possibly be a help for Medvedev. It's a difficult one to call because he does so many things well, so many things similarly to Djokovic. But as you mentioned, when it is a tough one to call like that, I've got to go with just the mental toughness of Djokovic. And I do think Medvedev's mentally tough. We've seen him win big matches, obviously the ATP finals, and I don't think the 2 Grand Slam finals he lost were necessarily, a bad mark against his mental game. It was just a case of him. He came up against Djokovic and Nadal, so I would just go with Djokovic to win. I agree. I would expect it to be a 3-setter and pretty close. But with the quest, I mentioned Djokovic is on for the the Golden Slam, and to win a first gold medal in itself will be a huge achievement. Obviously, his previous best result at the Olympics was bronze in 2008. We know he's had some heartbreaks and disappointments there in the past, but I think, yeah, he's just so determined to do it right now. The winning streak he's on, as I mentioned. I think Medvedev. Let's not do Medvedev a disservice to say I think Djokovic is the only one who can beat himself, but I do think if Djokovic plays his best, or somewhere near it, he wins. And we haven't even seen him play his best at Roland Garros, besides the Nadal match and Wimbledon. Then he still took the titles there. So back on the hard courts, I can see him continuing the streak. But it would be a fantastic final, I think, and both those finals would be if we got them, the ones we've predicted. So let's see how it plays out. But Kieran, thanks very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to preview the Olympics men's and women's singles draw. And we'll be back after the tournament to do a review to see how it all plays out. So thanks everyone for watching. The Down the Tee Tennis podcast are available on a number of podcasts and audio platforms now, as well as YouTube. So and also check out Down the Tee Tennis podcast on Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.